My friends, this spot right here is the absolute best spot in all of Everstoke. And today, and over the next however many weeks, I'm gonna build a high-tech observation deck. It's gonna be amazing. So I call this area here Soulshine Point, and I just imagine riding my bike up around sunset, bringing a couple cold beverages in my backpack, coming up to the deck, dangling my legs off the edge, and just taking in the beautiful sunset. So I've got a plan to run a bunch of cameras up here, a few different sensors, and all of that is gonna have quite a bit of a power draw. But thankfully, the fine sponsor of today's video, Bluetti, supplied me with the brand new AC200L portable power station. I'm gonna talk all about that a little bit later in the video. But man, that is gonna give me real deal power up here to make all this possible. Oh yeah, and if you've never heard of Everstoke, it's 91 acres of raw land that my buddy Aaron and I bought in the summer of 2021. We've been working to build mountain bike trails and accommodations for you to come out and stay and shred. This area is known as the Lost Sierra. It's an hour from Reno, an hour from Truckee, and it has tons of great mountain bike trails surrounding it, hundreds of miles and hundreds more miles to come in the future. It is very, very special place. If you want to come up and check this place out, you can stay for tonight. You could stay for a month if you want to. Head on over to everstoke.bike. Check out our tiny home. We've also got a couple other camping spots if you want to just pitch a tent or park a van. As you can see from my meticulous blueprints here, I planned out every stage of this build from top to bottom. It's going to be a 10-foot by 10-foot footprint. Big deck on top, smaller deck down below, and however high up it gets in the air is dependent on how deep the holes in the ground are for the footings. I really wish I would have done a foot shorter on each side and done a 9x9 deck. I'll explain all of that a little bit further down the road. But first, I need to load up the van and get up the road. I seriously did not realize that I would have to take the van up our janky dirt road until I had all the wood and material loaded in the back. All of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, I'm not hiking this up. I can't take this up in the Rokon. I can't drag this behind the e-bike. There's a first time for everything, and the van actually made it to the top several times because I would have to get more material all throughout this project. And thank goodness from the top of the property where I unloaded the van, the trail is nice and easy and basically flat over to Soulshine Point. I had an idea to actually build this whole deck in a totally different spot, which I thought would get more animals picked up on the camera. But holy moly, I'm so glad I canceled that idea and just kept it simple. So now it's time for a little site survey to basically pick where the deck's actually gonna go. And I thought it would be best if I just put the first post in the ground and then square everything off of that. So let's get started building a deck on the side of a mountain where it's so easy to slip and fall every 10 seconds, and the ground is just rock. I was not prepared for this at all. I hit the panic switch almost immediately. How are we gonna dig through this rock? It's like trying to scrape out your prison cell wall with a spoon. This is where the AC200L swept in and saved the day. I didn't think I was gonna need the portable power station until I started setting up the cameras and stuff. I had no idea I was gonna use it all the way throughout with my power tools. Thanks so much to the sponsor of today's video, Bluetti, for getting me through this. I jetted over to Reno, got a Bosch roto hammer with a long extension, and hammered away at these rocks for hours on end. The AC200L features a fantastic 2,048 watt-hour capacity with 2,400 watts of power output and 3,600 watts of surge capacity in powerlifting mode. So what does all of that actually mean? Well, with the roto hammer in hammer mode, that thing was pulling 600 watts, which means on a full charge of the Bluetti, I could go for 3.5 hours straight. And that's basically what I did for the next 3 days. I was also using the e-bike a ton when I would have to go down and fetch a tool and come back up,
way better than using the van, and I could just keep the e-bike plugged in and charging up while I was out there working. The e-bike charger goes at about 250 watts, which would take about 3 hours to go from 0% to full, but usually I would just charge it up for an hour a day and that would be good. And then later on in the project, I had to get a corded drill, something I've never used before. I've always used cordless. That's such a weird thing for people my generation. But it worked out so good, I didn't have to run up and down and charge batteries. Aaron was working on his amazing drop project at the same time, and he was burning through batteries, doing screws, and using the circular saw, so we didn't have to battle for the batteries. It was funny with the corded drill because I was using it, it was taking about 330 watts of power every time I would put a screw in, but I also had the solar panels out and they were putting in about 150 watts of power. So after a couple hours, I went from 79% on the battery to 82% on the battery. I actually gained power. As you probably know, I have put a lot of mileage on these portable power stations over the past couple years, and the AC200L has some killer upgrades that you can't live without now that they have them. The first thing you notice is the screen. It's clear, it's legible, it is really, really nice. And now you got the app working with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. I can check on the portable power station from home, 3.5 hours away, and see how everything's charging up at Everstoke. Another huge upgrade is you can plug the power station into the wall and it will charge up at 1200 watts. Before, you can only charge up at about 450 watts, and you would even have to have one of those big power dongle things getting in the way. And you can get 1200 watts of solar to charge up the AC200L at the same time as you have it plugged into the wall, so you can have it charging at 2400 watts, which will get the whole thing filled up in less than an hour. The AC200L uses the best-in-class lithium iron phosphate batteries, which can do 2500 cycles before you degrade the capacity down to 80%. That means you could fully charge and fully discharge your battery every day for 7 years before it starts to kind of degrade a little bit. That is so good in the world of batteries. With everything else, you're supposed to only charge it to 80% and only discharge it to 20%. So what, you really only have 60% of your battery to use? Not with lithium iron phosphate. It is about time you got a portable power station in your life. Are you ready for when the lights go out? There's a bunch of other features with the AC200L. Click the link in the description. You can use expandable batteries to increase the capacity ridiculously. You can also use it as an uninterruptible power supply. I could not do this project without it. So even with the merciful help of the power tools, I was still doing so much work. Had to dig out everything by hand. My fingernails started to pull off of my fingers. Yeesh. So the main deck structure is 4 posts, and you want to put those posts deep into the ground so they're nice and strong. The goal for the holes is to go 36 inches deep and 8 inches in circumference. I had a little cardboard template to keep me honest, to make sure my hole wasn't getting too small. If you've ever dug a hole like this, everything starts to get funneled down like a cone because you're just like, it's good enough, and then you realize it ain't good enough. That was a common theme throughout this project. I wanted to say, that's good enough, but I forced myself to put in the extra effort to try to get it as close to really good, not perfect, but as really good as possible. So now I'm finally deep enough to get the first post in the ground. I love this little post leveling tool. I could not have done this project without it. So I've got all this temporary wood bracing here to keep my pole straight up and down, because when I put in the Sika post fix, this stuff is like expansive foam and it kind of moves stuff around. So I want it to be as solid as possible while it's getting encapsulated. So instead of dealing with 60-pound bags of concrete and hoofing them up and then having to get them wet and have the right consistency, this Sika post fix is a lifesaver. It's basically a bag of spray foam that works really well to set posts. My first hole ended up being so big I had to use 3 bags of post fix to actually fill it up and have the stuff come out, because you don't want it to be below grade, because then water and stuff will get trapped in there. Water getting trapped against the post is no good. So that was a absolute soul-crushing first 4 days of work. And through the magic of editing, boom, let's get some momentum here. I've got 3 posts in the ground. I'm working on the 4th one. Hallelujah. And boom, once again, how about that? All 4 posts are now in the ground. So at this point, if I would have had a little bit more experience under my belt, I would have built out the bottom deck first so I could actually have a nice, flat, level surface to work off of. Getting up on the ladder on this hillside was a very bad idea. I'm surprised I didn't fall off. I guess I thought getting all 4 of the rim joists up and attached was more important to the structure of the whole thing than having a safe working environment. And now, hopefully, it's a little bit easier to visualize. The top deck is going to be up here, and the lower deck is going to be down here. Let's get building on the lower deck now, and this was like a dream. It was too good to be true. It was my first time using joist hangers, and I wasn't really sure how I was supposed to hold up the joist in midair while putting the hanger on and getting all the screws in. But then I went to YouTube, and the Fine Home Building channel had a perfect little solution. You just tack on a little piece of wood on top, and then the joists just hang in their hangers before you put the hangers on to hang them up. So the top deck is a lot bigger, but it's basically the same idea, and luckily I had my buddy Kellen come out for the day, and he helped out a ton. We had a whole system in place. After we got our 16-inch on center layout going, we would throw up a joist, he would put all the 10 screws in the hangers, I would go back down, cut another board, put it in place, and we were cooking. Then we got some blocking in along the center to rigidify everything up. So this is a huge milestone in the process of the deck. Now I just put the deck boards on top, and it's actually pretty simple and easy. So I thought. My first plan was to mill out a bunch of awesome redwood planks, just like Aaron did on his first phase deck around the tiny home that came out so nice. But I realized I needed at least 10-foot long deck boards, and we only had like 8-foot or 5-foot length redwood. And I was really so up against the time limit on this whole thing that learning how to use the sawmill and learning a brand new skill was gonna be pretty tough. I will eventually learn the sawmill and get those skills and do other projects, but this has got to keep moving forward. So I bit the bullet, I headed to Lowe's in Reno, actually a little bit later at night, which was awesome because there wasn't that many people around. I was able to get the guys to pick a brand new pallet for me because all of their janky boards that were all left over was not going to be good enough for my deck. The deck boards came in 16-foot length, so I had them cut down every single one, 25 cuts down to 10-foot and 6-foot, which helped out so much. And thank goodness I actually did it that previous night because in the morning I was able to drive the van up, unload all the deck boards, and then the rain came. That was probably the last time for the next 6 or 7 months that I'll be able to get the van up that high. Oh, a miracle to get all that material up there. I don't know what I would have done if it had been muddy and messy and yee. So starting with the bottom deck, I tried to put on this joist tape, which is supposed to help the wood from rot, but it was too wet. It was just this huge frustration, so I just blazed ahead without it. This was the most satisfying part of the entire project, to finally start to see all the deck boards go on one by one, and I thought they absolutely looked amazing. I used my speed square to make sure the gap between each board was consistent, and then I actually marked off a couple spots on my speed square to show me where I should be drilling the screws to make sure they kind of looked the same on each board. If you don't have a standard layout, it's gonna look really wonky really quick. So now, finally, this is where building a 10-foot by 10-foot deck and only being able to carry 10-foot long lumber in my van is gonna bite me. When you build a deck, or should I say, when I build a deck, it's not gonna be perfectly square. You're gonna try your best, it's gonna look pretty good, but when the rubber meets the road, things are gonna be wonky. But that's not too big of a deal, because if your deck boards overhang in the front and they overhang in the back, you can put down a chalk line and use your circular saw to zip off the front, and mentally, when you look at it, it'll look pretty good. Mathematically, it won't be exactly right, but your brain isn't gonna go that far. So I finished the lower deck around 1 o'clock, and it was actually dry enough for me to get on the upper deck and put on the joist tape. Spruce, pine, and fir are not the best materials to make a deck out of, But I'm hoping this joist tape helps, and this thing is just gonna get beat down in the sun all day, every day. It's not like in a deep, dark crevasse. And now, from this moment, I proceeded to absolutely melt down. I could not get the first run of boards started and looking correct at all. I had enough daylight to actually get this done and go home victorious, but instead, it was just hours of chasing my tail. I want this thing to look good, and I kept having to put screws in, take screws out, and these first 3 boards were getting turned into Swiss cheese, and I only had a couple extras to spare. The boards were like 35 bucks each, so to have 3 or 4 extra boards is like 160 bucks. It was absolute turmoil. I broke my speed square in frustration. I didn't mean to break it, but it was plastic and it ended up breaking. That's like my most important tool on this whole project. And then the rain arrived and shut everything down. The next day was a full loss, 24 hours of rain just soaking through and making everything a muddy mess. But Aaron and Dan and I did manage to get a little fire going, and we did a little forest management, taking down some dead trees that needed to go. All right, it's a new day. The sun is out. Let's get building. I got supremely mud bogged 2 times trying to get to the top, and finally on my 3rd try, I was able to make it to the top. Oh, sweet, glorious deck. Let's do this. Things were a little bit frozen, but that didn't slow me down at all because I had my brand new metal speed square to do some scraping. So after thinking about this for 30 plus hours, I have a new plan. I'm gonna use the board on the bottom to line everything up, to kind of sort of square it up, just to make it all look good. And that board is a little too short, so it will need to get replaced with a longer board eventually. As they say, gradually, then suddenly, the deck boards started to get pinned on the deck. It was looking fantastic. I had to fight quite a few of these boards, but it's good enough. I really hate getting my muddy boots on the deck, so I'll just crawl over here and finally dangle the legs and get to enjoy it for like 30 seconds or so until I get back to work. That tree is gonna mysteriously vanish in the night here pretty soon. It was nice enough to have my shirt off for about 2 minutes, and then the sun went behind the clouds. Hot and cold. Holy moly, what a milestone this is. There's still a lot to do. I have like 300 more screws to put in, all these planks. But to get this far, right here, right now, is so amazing. I'm missing all kinds of things. I'm pushing back all kinds of stuff. I have to get this done on deadline before I fly out for Thanksgiving. I'm glad. So good. I'm not looking forward to having to clean up the job site here. A lot of that wood is going to be tucked under there for quite a while until I can get the van back up next year. Okay, so I've run out of time. The high-tech portion of the observation deck is gonna have to wait just a little while. Hopefully we don't get a million feet of snow up here within the next couple weeks, and I'll be able to get back up, finish off a couple little bits and pieces, build a little trail up to here. There's still so much I wanna do and show you, and hopefully one day you'll come out here and see it and enjoy it for yourself. And hopefully you enjoyed this video. Give it a share, send it to somebody you might think like it. Oh, this is so nice. The sun is out, I'm feeling good, but I still need to get this going so I can get going for Thanksgiving. So do me a favor, go write something new, go build something new, go travel somewhere new, and maybe I'll see you out there.